Well, I was trying to pass along a compliment. You don't have to show if you prefer not to.
No.
For me, this is the middle of the night, so you know, when I was teaching, I had to report at 7. I can count on one hand at my last school site how often I got there at that time. And since I worked with special needs students, I kind of had to make sure somebody was there to get them off the bus. So fortunately, I had an instructional assistant who was so faithful, except when she didn't let me know she wasn't coming in. And then the campus security had to take my kids to my class. That was pretty embarrassing. Oh. All right, we'll wait a few more minutes. Cantoral solo was Liz Baseman. Were you able to get any rest?
Yes, I had a wonderful night's sleep. Thank you very much.
Exhaustion will do that to you, or it'll have the opposite effect where you're so tired you can't sleep.
Yep.
Patty, what I'm referring to, and Stacy as well, Mark, I'm not sure if you were there. Liz Baseman is a classmate of mine at the Academy for Jewish Religion. She's in the Cantoral program, and she co-led service with me last night.
Oh, okay. All righty.
So that's the connection. What I'd like to do before we actually get officially started is go around and do introductions, because there are a number of you that may not know most of the people here, or at least some of them. So it would also be helpful for me to know what your connections are to the temple. Maybe they're through Rabbi Singer and you've taken a class, or your connection is to me, or whatever. So. Okay. Wipe the sleepies out of my eyes. Stacy, are you in Redlands?
I live in an area that is currently called High Grove, which used to be known as the landfill when I was a little younger.
Okay. Is it that area between Riverside and Grand Terrace, or is it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ryan and I lived in Grand Terrace for about a year, maybe. This was when it was the old Stater Brothers that it's been gone for quite a while. Okay. All right. People may trickle in, but as they do, good morning, Suzanne. And good morning, Rabbi Suzanne. And Dr. Moss, here from Mountain View School District, or is it elementary school district, or?
Mountain View School District.
Thank you. Are you K7, K8?
We're TK through 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How are your teachers holding up?
Yeah. As best as can be expected. I have an amazing staff. They do amazing things every day. They send me videos and clips of what they're doing. It's fantastic. Great. But it's just a lot to ask of our teachers and our parents and our students. So it's, but they're doing an absolutely outstanding job. So
pleased to hear that.
Proud of them.
Are the students doing any follow-up, or are they just kind of pretending? Or are they actually engaged?
Some are, some aren't, but that's the same as in the classroom. So, you know, but yeah. So, I mean, it's the reality of it. But I get videos of their science projects and their essays. I had one girl who sent me a video of her reading her poems that she has been writing over during the COVID-19
Very
times.
Nice.
And so they're as engaged as I could possibly ask for them.
Okay, so, yeah. Very nice. All right, thank you. Okay, what I'm going to ask is, based on the view that I have from my vantage point, I'm going to go around and ask people to just introduce yourselves, your name, where you live, your connection to the temple, if you prefer. Chris, it's awfully nice to have you here. I was concerned that I hadn't seen you, and I need to make connection on the telephone call because you're probably the closest person to me, and I need to touch base. Okay, I'm going to ask Ryan, who today is not only my life partner of almost 30 years, but he is our sound engineer with the capable assistance provided by Rabbi Singer. So Ryan, if you could introduce yourself.
The sound's going to get weird. Anyway, Ryan Lester Wilson, member of the temple for 20 years, just helping out when I can.
Thank you. Patty?
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Watson, and I live here in Riverside, and I've taken numerous classes with Rabbi Singer over the years.
Very good. Thank you. We warmly welcome you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Liz Baseman. It's kind of like Hollywood Squares, as people have said before, except you're not the three across and Paul Lind isn't here, so you're going to have to make jokes amongst yourselves. But Liz Baseman.
Good morning. My name is Liz Baseman. I'm a second-year cantorial student at AJRCA, and it's lovely to be here this morning.
Thank you so very much for getting up to do this. You've got to be a tired camper. Mark Feldstein.
I'm Mark Feldstein, originally from Chicago, but live in Riverside.
I had no idea, Mark, that you were from Chicago. Do you know Carpentersville or Algonquin, Hanover Park, in those areas? They're in the rural areas of Chicago. So that's all I know about Chicago.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you happen to know where Algonquin, Carpentersville, Hanover Park are?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Mark has shared. So Jason, how about you? The honoree of day 15 of Counting the Omer by none other than Alan Moranis. You don't get higher kudos than that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that last night, Randy.
You're welcome.
I
gets the credit.
Don't generally advertise things, but that was very nice of my group to do that. Yeah, I've been a temple member for at least 15 years now, I think, here in Riverside, and I'm also on the board. I serve as secretary on the executive committee, and I've been in part of this Torah study group as often as possible. I've probably been to 90% plus of them over the past, whatever we're up to, 7-8 years. I can't tell. Rabbi probably remembers when we started.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Doug Moss, if you could introduce yourself. I've kind of done that a little bit for you, but.
My name's Doug Moss. I've been a temple member for a year. I'm originally from the Bay Area. I live out in Rancho Cucamonga, and I'm just very happy to be here.
Thank you. Are we having a meteor shower behind you, or?
That's right. That's actually pictures I took when I was in the Faroe Islands back in September. That's part of the aurora.
And where are the Faroe Islands?
Faroe Islands is a beautiful set of islands between Iceland and Scotland.
How incredible is that? And we
the
also
North Atlantic.
Wow. And Mark is up in the Bay Area, the Bay Bridge in the background there. So, no, it's not that. The Golden Gate Bridge, I'm sorry. We lived in San Jose, so we were more familiar with the Bay Bridge. Suzanne, Mallory, if you could introduce yourself, please, and what your connection is to the temple, either specifically or peripherally.
Okay, I'm Suzanne Mallory. I live in Riverside. I actually live about a block away from the rabbi. So, and I went to the Taste of Judaism class with Randy.
Do I want to?
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay. All right. Chris, I'm going to have you go next, if that's all right.
Sure. I've been associated with Temple Bethel for a couple of years. I live in Cathedral City, and I moved from Oakland, and I actually studied with Rabbi Singer up in Oakland. I knew her the entire time she was up there. I've actually had trouble finding the links to get on, and I think I now have things set up so that if I look in the newsletter, that seems to be the one place where things are listed. So
Okay, very good.
to be back on track for showing up.
All right. We are so glad that you're here. And I think in terms of this group, you probably have the most history with Rabbi Singer, rather than, actually, I think that, no, Ryan and I first met Rabbi Singer when she was interim between rabbis back in the early 2000s. All right, Vicki or Victoria? I'm used to calling you Victoria, but.
Hi, I'm Vicki. Is the sound on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All's well.
Yeah, I'm from the Taste of Judaism class, and I live in Nuevo right now, and I'm originally from Claremont, California.
Very good. Thank you. It looks like you and Mark are sharing the Golden Gate Bridge there.
Yeah.
Lynn Lipscomb?
I have been a member of the temple since, I think it was around 81, possibly. I'm not sure exactly. I'm living Corona, and there's not a whole lot to say.
Right. That's good enough.
I think you had mentioned a few minutes ago you weren't sure when this started. It was September of 2011 that we started this Torah study.
Wow.
Series.
That's awesome.
I've written down every date since then.
That's terrific. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay.
All right. Rosalie, if you could unmute and just share with those who don't know you, your connection to Temple Bethel.
Can I just add, now I know why Lynn always knows exactly what verse we're on.
We can count on Lynn for keeping excellent notes. Thank you. Okay, Rosalie, you're going to need to press the microphone that is red. And when you press that, it should, there you go. You're ready.
I am. My name, you've got me down as Rosalie. I'm Rosalie Silverglade Anderson. I'm a founding member of this congregation, and we came to Riverside in 1940. So I think I'm probably one of the most senior members of the congregation, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to upgrade my education.
Thank you, Rosalie. And for those who were at the service last night, Rabbi Hillel Cohn is your, no, he's not directly related to you, it's your brother. That makes a lot of sense, Randy. Of course your brother's related to you, but the connection there is your brother is married to one of my former instructors at Cal State, San Bernardino, and then they all share the connection of Rabbi Hillel Cohn. Okay, Stacy?
I have been a member of Temple Bethel since 2011 because I think I was there for the first Torah study. So I live in the northern part of Riverside, between Riverside and Grand Terrace. That's it.
Thank you, Stacy. And identifying themselves as Temple Bethel Riverside is Rabbi Suzanne Singer. Rabbi, I'm not sure if you'd like to share, but you are probably the connecting force to all of us. But if you'd like to say anything, feel free to do so. Hearing nothing, I guess there are no oppositions. Ryan, if you could go ahead and screen share the blessing for studying Torah. And he's going to mute everyone. Okay. Oh, where is it? Oh, you're showing it shared? Does anyone else see it? Because I don't. We're getting a nope.
Tell them to hit the share button on the top right-hand side next to the green bar.
Okay, he said that he's done that.
He's sharing the folder, not the document.
Yeah, Ryan, what we see is the when you're going to go to something. Okay. Nope.
I
Right,
recommend unsharing and resharing.
Okay, Ryan, Liz recommends sharing and unsharing. Ryan has his headphones on because when he is doing what he needs to do. Okay, here we are. And now we're hanging in there. There we go. All right. Please either join me in reading the Hebrew or the transliteration. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. This morning, before we actually get into the meat of what we're going to share, and if you're vegan, we get into the protein, I would like to read from Alden Sullivan's This Joyous Soul. Let Torah hold your moments, carry your days, lift your years. Let Torah fill your hands, nourish your breath, refresh your heart. Let Torah sustain your words, enliven your deeds, lead you home. For Torah is in each life and in each generation, and the yearning of God and in God's yearning for us, the flow of secrets from Sinai and divine guidance and grace. Calling out to you, dear sisters and brothers, awake you slumberers, awake you wander empty and lonely without wonder and awe. Have you forgotten this precious gift? Have you forsaken your past and your future? Have you traded your birthright for empty promises? This, then, is God's command. Let Torah hold you, fill you, sustain you. Let Torah guide you into radiance and mystery, study and learn, question and seek, heed and grow, lifting your life in sacred service. Let Torah be your breath and your heartbeat. Blessed are you, source of Torah. All righty. What I'd like to share at this time is an overview of Parshat Re'eh, and then we'll actually go back just a few verses to where we were ending the last time that we gathered. This is from Rabbi Louis M. Barth, who may very well have been one of Rabbi's instructors at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles. Provides the following overview of this parshat. Re'eh means see, as in Parshat Re'eh contains a remarkable richness of diverse biblical materials. It opens with the blessing and curse that God sets before the people based on their choice of following or disobeying the commandments. A concern with idolatry permeates the following passages. Chapter 12 states the commandments, the first of which is to obliterate all expressions of idolatry, and only to sacrifice and celebrate at the site that the eternal your God will choose. The test for a false prophet and the investigation and punishment of a city suspected of having gone astray after idolatry continue the same theme in chapter 13. And in chapter 14, there's a shift to other subjects. The prohibition against self-mutilation, biblical basis of the laws of kashrut, keeping kosher, tithing so that the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your settlement shall come and eat their fill. The remission of debts in the 7th year, care for the poor, freeing of Hebrew slaves in the 7th year, and the dedication of the firstborn of cattle and the flock to God are the subjects of chapter 15. And finally, chapter 16 provides the command for the pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. At this time, Ryan is going to share the text of the Torah reading. This is actually from Chabad.org. With our unfamiliarity with the process, I wanted to bring up Sefaria, though that's still not of my liking. So this is really not of my liking, but that's just my personal preference. And so I'm going to ask if we could have one reader go back. We're going to start in chapter 11, verse 26. We completed up to 29 last week, but just as a refresher. So Ryan, if you could go ahead, or you have already shared that. And so what I would share for the verses prior to this, in verses 1 through 25, it's Moses' third speech, focusing on the promise of prosperity or obedience. And then in smaller chunks, verses 1 through 9, reflecting on what's behind them should spur the Israelites to what's ahead. 10 through 21, the link between agriculture in the promised land and appropriate behavior, ensuring God's blessings. And finally, 22 through 25, this speech ends with a new condition for God's favor. Obedience yields military victory. All right, if someone could begin reading on, or at, chapter 11, verse 26, and we're going to continue all the way through chapter 12, verse 31. So if we have a volunteer for that, that would be great. Otherwise, I would be willing to do it as well.
I could read.
Thank you, Doug.
Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing that you will heed the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, and the curse if you will not heed the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn away from the way I command you this day, to follow other gods which you did not know. And it will be when the Lord your God will bring you to the land to which you come to possess it, that you shall place those blessing upon Mount Gerizim and those cursing upon Mount Ebal. Are they not on the other side of the Jordan, way beyond in the direction of the sunset, in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the plain opposite Gilgal, near the plains of Moriah? For you are crossing the Jordan to come to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall possess it and dwell in it, and you shall keep to perform all the statutes and ordinances that I am setting before you today. These are the statutes and ordinances that you shall keep to perform in the land which the Lord God of your fathers gives you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. I shall utterly destroy from all the places where the nations that you shall possess worship their gods, upon the lofty mountains and upon the hills and under their lush tree. And you shall tear down their altars, smash their monuments, burn their asherim with fire, cut down the graven images of their gods, and destroy their name from that place.
Thank you. Before we continue, Doug, if someone could mute, we're hearing keyboards going, somebody's busy. And let's see. Okay. All right. Doug, I apologize for interrupting. Brian, can you mute all? Can you? Okay, he's unable to. Okay. Doug, if you could skip what is on the screen, because I've been reminded that it was chapter 12, not chapter 11. Thank you so much for our faithful note taker, because I am a chapter off, and so I'm eating some crow here. So Ryan, if you could go down to chapter 12. Okay.
All right.
And all the way down to, how about verse 16?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So you want me to start at 16?
Yes, if you could.
Okay.
Thank you.
However, you shall not eat the blood, you shall spill it on the ground like water. You may not eat within your cities the tithe of your grain, or your wine, or of your oil, or the firstborn of your cattle, or of your sheep, or any of your vows that you will vow, or your donations, or the separation by your hand. For you shall eat them before the Lord your God in the place that Lord your God will choose you. Your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, and Levite who is in the cities, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God in all your endeavors. Beware lest you forsake the Levite all your days upon your land. When the Lord God, your God, expands your boundary as he has spoken to you, and you will say, I will eat meat because your soul desires to eat meat, you may eat meat according to every desire of your soul. If the place the Lord your God chooses to put his name there will be distant from you, you may slaughter of your cattle and of your sheep, which the Lord has given you, as I have commanded you, and you may eat in your cities according to every desire of your soul. But as the deer and the gazelle are eaten, so may you eat them. The unclean and the clean alike may eat of them. However, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the soul, and you shall not eat the soul with the flesh. You shall not eat it, you shall spill it on the ground like water. You shall not eat it in order you shall not eat it in order that it be good for you and for your children after you when you do what is proper in the eyes of the Lord. However, your holy offerings which you will have and your vows you shall carry and come to the place that the Lord chooses. And you shall make your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord your God, and the blood of your sacrifices shall be poured upon the altar of the Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh.
Okay, and we'll continue through verse 31.
Keep and hearken to all those words that I command you, that it may benefit you and your children after you forever, when you do what is good and proper in the eyes of the Lord your God. When the Lord your God cuts off the nations to which you come to drive them out from before you, and when you drive them out and dwell in their land, beware lest you be attracted after them after they are exterminated from before you, and lest you inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? And I will do likewise. You shall not do so to the Lord your God, for every the nations the Lord which he hates they did to their gods, for also their sons and their daughters they would burn in fire to their gods.
Thank you so much, Doug. Just a few highlights of beginning back in chapter 11 at the start of this Torah portion. And what I would also like to do is just to share a few points going through what Doug completed reading. In chapter 11, verses 26 through 32, the blessings and curses were dependent upon the Israelites. Behave and then misbehave, and guess what? And then there's the beginning of the legal material that starts in chapter 12. In chapter 12, verses 1 through 14, we have the introduction of God's chosen place, and it must be centralized. 15 through 28, regulations about meat and tithing. And then finally, in 29 to 31, refrain from worshiping other gods. At this time, I'm going to ask Ryan to screen share the first of our materials for Parshat Re'eh, and this is from Cantor David Reinwald. Okay, Ryan, if you could scroll down to the, yes, continue scrolling down to the, okay, thank you. And if someone would be so kind to read this, I apologize for the size of the font. For those of us with trifocals,
I'll give it a shot.
There you go. Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome. Almost, never mind. Parashat Rai. Hello?
Re'eh.
Re'eh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Re'eh. Deuteronomy 11:26 through 28. Cantor David Reinwald. This week's Torah portion opens with one of the lines of the Torah that I find most beautiful and thought-provoking. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing, if you obey the commandments of the eternal your God, that I enjoin upon you this day. And curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the eternal your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day. There's a haunting quality to these words that on one hand seem to empower us for good, and yet it seems that we are constantly towing the line of failure should we forget to follow a commandment. And how do we do this as Reformed Jews, choosing to structure our Jewish lives around the commandments that individually have weight and meaning for us? It can be a tough decision to make and path to tread. I highly value the right that we have as Reformed Jews to make informed and valued choices for ourselves. I think this is one of the most important things we can take from this verse. The Torah is directly saying that we have been given and had set before us free choice to live our lives at our own will, but ultimately we must also accept the consequences of these choices. We can choose to follow the commandments which make sense to us, which oftentimes are the mishpatim, the commandments in the Torah, which explicitly state their reasoning. We see many references in Deuteronomy to the mishpatim, as well as their counterpart, the chukim. While mishpatim and chukim often are translated without much differentiation in our commentaries as just laws and rules, there is a greater definition to the term chukim as laws in the Torah which do not have a full explanation. As one of my friends recently reminded me, they are like those things that we were growing up and whined to our parents, "Why do I have to do this?" The answer we received was a simple because. This is certainly not a response that was always the one we wanted to hear, but one we could rarely argue with and come out the winner. And oftentimes, by going through the motions, we find great personal meaning in the action of doing the mitzvah itself, and a unique motive for the mitzvah is thus found. Go on.
Yes, if you could, please.
Sure. Rabbi Bradley Shavit Ardson has pointed out in his book, The Bedside, that the very point of having the commandments commanded to us is that we otherwise might miss the boat. We need their insistence and direction to point us in the right direction. We can choose so many ways of living for good, and even when we make a mistake, we can then choose to learn and move forward, or to remain unmotivated in a fixed position. We always have the choice to empower ourselves to overcome obstacles we face to help others. Israeli poet Leah Goldberg spoke well of this condition to be taught and to continue this process of renewal, redefinition, and living to the fullest. Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, the secret of wilting leaves, the brilliance of ripe fruit, this freedom to see, to feel, to breathe, to know, to hope, to fail. Teach my lips a blessing and a song of praise as each morning and night you renew your days, lest my days be as the one before, lest routine set my ways.
Thank you so much, Stacy. I know that was quite a chunk full.
It's interesting because for me, it's a pretty interesting reading because I always come at things from a kind of a legal standpoint anyway, and talking about setting out the rules and the laws. And I go back to the analogy that we had last week, which was that although our God sounds so angry a lot and sounds so threatening and so unforgiving, in many ways I think he sounds a lot like a parent. And and just like every parent, I think every one of us loses our minds every once in a while. Fortunately for I think most of us, we have a better sense of self-restraint than a lot of people, but you never know. And
Yeah.
with all of this sequestering in place, you know, I worry for all the kids and the spouses that are stuck indoors with people who don't have an opportunity to get real with themselves and
Most assuredly. Yes.
treat their family better.
Yes.
There was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember it. So I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you, Stacy. And I think that the blessing and the challenge of being or identifying as Reformed Jews or those who remain in solidarity with us is that when Cantor Weinwald says, and how do we, as Reformed Jews, choosing to structure our Jewish lives around the commandments that individually have weighed and have meaning for us. It can be a tough decision to make and path to tread.
Randy,
yes.
Can I ask a real quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, please go ahead.
No, but the thought comes to me is with your just last statement about dealing with those commandments and rules and regulations that we think are more pertinent to our lives. Are we running the risk of picking and choosing what, I don't quite know how to ask that, but the phrase picking and choosing, the laws that we like, that are easy to follow versus the ones that are maybe a little bit more difficult, might make us stretch as people, as a person. But oh my gosh, that's really hard and I don't want to do that. So that's one of the ones I don't want to do. I mean, am I making sense? Are you understanding what I'm trying to ask?
Absolutely. Your question is well taken, and it's one that I myself have asked. I think as Reformed Jews, we're encouraged to examine the mitzvot. And as we do so, we make a decision based upon our spiritual understanding and whether or not it has meaning for us. And coupled with that, I'm reminded of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel when he was asked, do you lay tefillin? Do you put on the phylacteries with the leather and this?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, not yet. And so I think that what that does is it's a two-edged sword. We can either acknowledge that this isn't meaningful for me now, but it may be, but also at the same time, this isn't meaningful for me now, and I don't know that it will be, or maybe it won't be in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a balancing act, and I think that it really boils down for us in making choices based on spiritual matters, on those things that are meaningful. They're ethics and morals that we may want to balk at, but we can't. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just can't go smack.
We have to be extremely truthful with ourselves, not only as individuals, but as a society and as a group.
Yes.
About making sure that we don't just pick the easy ones to follow and not do the harder ones that make us uncomfortable.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
and that can be difficult, you know, to be very honest, you know, people don't necessarily like to, you know, maybe be that honest with themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's essential to grapple, and that's why we are Yisrael, the ones who wrestle with God and question God. And I know that for a number of us, it was difficult coming into Judaism as Jews by choice because we were told what we believed, whether we believed it or not. And so we didn't have to go through those mental processes of, does my heart resonate with that? Or is that just some abusive divine being that I just assume not have anything to do with? So your questions are not only well taken, but they are felt by a number of us. Mark has been trying so hard to get my attention, and I know that you're there. And then Jason.
To Patty's point, if we look at classical reform in the turn of the century, services were on Sunday. There was an emphasis on confirmation. you might not find any Hebrew in the prayer book. And I'm not going to be so bold as to say exactly why. There might have been, an effort at assimilation. There might have been an effort at, trying to take away from, you must know this language, you must know the sacred writings, make it more approachable. But there definitely has been, I don't know, an opportunity cost for being able to make some of those decisions, because over the last 15, 20 years, some people in Reform Judaism have gone back to, as Randy alluded to fill in or seat, gone back to more Hebrew than English, gone back to considering the second day for the high holidays. And maybe neither are wrong, but you sort of, sometimes maybe from our vantage point, it's like, why did we do that? What were we thinking?
Yes.
Did the pendulum go too far?
Yes. In the early days of Reform Judaism, they essentially threw the baby out with the bathwater. And Reform Judaism is realizing, you know what? Let's re-examine this. Are these meaningful for us? Are the rituals that we discarded something that can provide a spiritual relevance for us? And so, as Mark shared, we just went, okay, out the window. And there was a time when within Reform Judaism classical, they were wearing black robes, and they were not called rabbis, they were called ministers. And an expectation was, if you were in a Reformed congregation, that's what rabbis did. Well, classically, in the Reform movement, yes, but that's not tradition in terms of who we are as a people. Mark, thank you so much for your comments. Patty, I'm not sure if that helped in terms of our perspective within the Reform movement, but I too struggle and feel like you're walking that fine line, that plank on the pirate ship of, am I going to push it too far and I'm going to get kicked off the poop deck into the poop, or is it going to come back to hit me in the face? I'm not sure. Okay.
I think I just one more comment. It's probably my question, and is probably a question that probably everyone has, no matter kind of what religion you are in, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam. You're going to have very conservative people within that religion, and more liberal ones. And how far conservative do you go? How far liberal do you go? And still maintain the true essence of their religion.
Yes. Well taken. Thank you. Jason?
Well, I like to think of, I visualize it with a spectrum, that there's like, here's 613 commandments that you're following, as devoutly as possible, and here's 0, right? And pretty much everyone I know is somewhere in the middle of this space, right? I mean, there's at least a few that everybody seems pretty good about. And I know very few people who are over here. And my feeling has always been, if you are conscientious about the things that you are doing, wherever you are in that middle, you've already made a choice not to be at 0 and not to be at exactly every single thing. So once you've made that choice to not be either of those, does the number really matter? I don't think it does. It's just how you put those pieces into practice. One time in Torah study a couple years back, it was during Passover, and we sort of ended up in a conversation going around of what everybody considers okay to eat. And no two people had the same Passover restrictions in their house. And it went as extreme as one person who would never eat anything that they didn't prepare themselves in their house, no matter what, not even their kids, and separate dishes and everything. To some people, had Sephardic traditions, some people had Ashkenazi. The point being, we all had an intentionality to Passover. We all did something that we considered following appropriately, but none of us were on the same level. And I thought that was so classically, not to use the classically Reform, but so exactly what Reform is about, is that we all had intentionality, but none of us had the same thing.
Right. Thank you so much, Jason. It goes back to talking about when we were referring to the counting of the Omer, the extremes from Aleph to Tav, and everything in between is we do have folks within the Reform movement who are so far to the right that I don't know why they don't identify as reformative. And we have those, such as myself, that are further left than the Reform movement, and we really do need to find the keva and the kavanah, the meaning and the intention behind what it is that we're putting into practice. Were there other hands that, Chris, did you have your hand up? Yes. And thank you folks for being so respectful in muting and unmuting. You are a high functioning kind of group. I appreciate it.
This kind of ties in with your question, Patty. I was struck when you're reading about you have to prepare meat so that there's no blood, because that's where the soul is.
Mm.
And I find it interesting, and it struck me as being what I would call archaic, written at a time when people didn't understand the body, didn't understand the ins and outs of it. So is the soul really in the blood? Where, you know, and so that makes me look at how necessary is it to eat kosher meat. And I'm a Jew by choice and grew up in a Christian household where we were taught and told, but never engaged in dialogue to examine text. So if we were told, hey, don't do this or do this, that's what you were expected to do. And one of the reasons that I decided to convert was because of exactly the opportunity to examine bit by bit each step of the way, and it's encouraged. And my son was, who's now 22, was brought up Jewish from the day he was born, and learned that questioning, and he does that in every part of his life, which is very unusual for me. But I have great respect for being able to look at, I mean, I couldn't even tell you where all 613 commandments are. You know, I'd have to go online and get somebody to print it out. And then I've never sat down with anybody to examine all 613 of them and get their opinion. I've read through them and looking at different ones. Like a few weeks ago, I said, I don't know what 100 prayers I should say every day, but knowing that I can recognize those little things, like, hey, I took my shower today, and I'm glad I'm on the desert. It's over 100 degrees out here already, and by 9 o'clock it's 102. You know, I'm glad that I have a place to be inside.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of the blessings to say during the day? I have no idea, but
I think gratitude is appropriate at any time.
But I think it ties into that question of, am I going to get zapped? I didn't have access to all the elements to have on my Seder plate. The only thing on my Seder plate that was quote unquote traditional was a hard-boiled egg.
Mhm.
But everything that I put on there had meaning for this year in this time and place. And to me, that was more important than following the letter of somebody who wrote stuff down.
Indeed, you had the Kevin and the Kavanah. You had the meaning and the intention behind it, and it came directly from your heart and soul. So what more could God ask than you give fully of yourself? So, indeed, Jason
But I
mentioned.
think that's true. I think that's true in every element. I think if if we're not stagnant in what we're doing, and I question the people who from the get-go are told, hey, you have to follow all of these, and or we're gonna send you to your room because you didn't do whatever. You forgot to wash your hands, or you forgot to say the blessing, you can't eat tonight, or whatever. I really question the wisdom of that, because does it help the person become more intentional,
Right.
and respectful of it, or does it turn people away?
Yeah.
And I think that's the answer to that question is answered by each individual, and for some it works and some it doesn't.
I think it's an interesting component too. I mean, when I was in my early 20s, I was part of a conservative congregation up in the Bay Area, and I remember being asked, "Well, it must be easy for you to maintain kosher since you're a vegetarian." And I thought it was very interesting, because I always think back to this very simple question of, it must be very easy for you to maintain a kosher household if you're vegetarian. And my response was, I still have to be mindful about what I eat. I still have to be mindful about what I'm bringing in. And it was very interesting. It seems like a very simple, basic statement, but it actually went far deeper than that, because it was a deeper conversation about everything that we do and the intentionality and the mindfulness behind it. Is it easy to go ahead and maintain a kosher household when I wasn't just vegetarian, then I was vegan? That was really easy. However, at the same time, you still have this level of mindfulness that you have to go ahead and bring in. And my rationale at the time for why I was vegan, or even today why I'm vegetarian, or what that is, and what I eat and how I eat, and how I'm bringing that energy into me. And it took it to such a deeper level, whether it's tefillin, whether it's the kosher laws, whether it's our intentionality. Certainly just the mere fact that you had a Seder plate, that is an intentionality right there. Whether what you have, and Jason said that perfectly. It was, you have the plate, and there's the plate, and what you put on the plate, even if it's in your mind, there's an intentionality and a mindfulness that comes back to it. So here I was as a 20-year-old, at this conservative shul in the Bay Area, being asked this very point blank question, question also a statement of almost, well, how easy it must be for you. You don't really have to, you can go out and eat any place. No, actually, as a vegan, I can't go out and eat any place, because I still have to be mindful. And even though that just has to do with food and has to do with kosher laws, I think it went so much deeper to that. And it's a conversation that all these years later, I still come back to. Why do I do what I do? And how does that tie in? And recognizing that's going to change over time as my spiritual practice and growth occurs as well.
Beautifully stated. Thank you so much. Before we go on, just a quick story. In terms of the temple, we recognize the fact that some of our members do keep kosher. And so when there is an oneg or a potluck, we make sure that if someone happens to bring a casserole that is meat, it is kept separate, though we put out not a disclaimer, but an informative piece that says it's going to be milchnik, so it's going to be dairy, or it's going to be fleischnik, there'll be meat. But the challenge for the kids, like when Sean is our son, who's now almost 25, when he was going through Hebrew school, which what we called then, that was on Tuesday afternoons, and he would come through the office, and how many, Patty, have you been to the temple office before? It doesn't matter one way or another, but have you seen how it's structured? Okay, so Elisa's office, she's the temple administrator. She has a separate room and she has a sliding window, just like at a drive-through, okay? And Sean would come by and she'd say, "Yes, sir, can I take your order?" And he'd say, "I'd like a cheeseburger, please." She said, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't serve those at this restaurant." And he goes, "Oh man," and they both knew that it was just a joke, and they were teasing one another. But in terms of the issue of keeping kashrut, all right. I think without further discussion, let's go ahead and ask someone to begin reading Deuteronomy chapter 13, verses 1 through 19, as Ryan shares the screen for that. So we're at Deuteronomy chapter 13, verses 1 through, let's go through 14:29. So that's going to be another big chunk. But if someone would be so kind, and we can break that up into a couple pieces if someone doesn't want to read the whole thing. So beginning at chapter 13, verse 1 through 14:29. Yes, 14:29. Okay, volunteers? Okay, I can't see everybody, so I'm looking for hands. I don't see any hands. All right, so.
Randy, I'll do it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Everything I command you that you shall be careful to do it. You shall neither add to it nor subtract from it. If there will arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder of which he spoke to you happens, and he says, "Let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us worship them," you shall not heed the words of that prophet or that dreamer of a dream. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall follow the Lord your God, fear him, keep his commandments, heed his voice, worship him, and cleave to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of a dream shall be put to death, because he spoke falsehood about the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to lead you astray from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to go. So shall you clear away the evil from your midst. If your brother, the son of your mother, tempts you in secret, or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your embrace, or your friend, who is as your own soul, saying, "Let us go and worship other gods, which neither you nor your forefathers have known," of the gods of the peoples around you, whether near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not desire him, and you shall not hearken to him. Neither shall you pity him, have mercy upon him, nor shield him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones so that he dies, because he sought to lead you astray from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And all Israel shall listen in fear, and they shall no longer do any evil such as this in your midst. If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell therein, saying, "Unfaithful men have gone forth from among you, and have led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, 'Let us go and worship other gods which you have not known,' then you shall inquire, investigate, and ask thoroughly. And behold, it is true, the matter is certain, that such abomination has been committed in your midst. You shall surely strike down the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroy it with all that is in it and its livestock, and the edge of the sword. And you shall collect all its spoil into the midst of its open square, and burn with fire the city and all its spoil completely. For the Lord your God and it shall be a heap of destruction forever, never to be rebuilt. Let me see. And nothing that is doomed to destruction shall cling to your hand, so that the Lord may return from his fierce wrath and grant you compassion, and to be compassionate with you, and multiply you as he swore to your forefathers. For you shall hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep all his commandments which I command to you this day, to do that which is proper in the eyes of the Lord your God.
Would you like to continue, or would you like someone else to carry on?
It doesn't matter. If you want me to, I will, or if somebody else wants to read, that's fine. I don't care. You want me to do, I don't care. Just
But feel free to do so. I can't see everybody's hands or faces in the view that I have. So seeing none, verse 1 of chapter 14. Suzanne, if you could continue. And that's at the top of the screen.
Right. Am I still doing it? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. You are children of the Lord your God. You shall neither cut yourselves nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For you are holy people of the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be a treasured people for him out of all the nations that are upon the earth. You shall not eat any abomination. These are the animals that you may eat: ox, lamb, and kid, gazelle, deer, and antelope, ibex, chamois, bison, and giraffe, and every animal that has a split hoof and has a hoof cloven into two sections, and choose the cud among the animals that you may eat. But you shall not eat of those that chew the cud, or of those that have the split hooves, the cloven one, the camel, the hyrax, and the hare, for they chew the cud, but do not have split hooves. They are unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a split hoof, but does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you. You shall neither eat of their flesh nor touch their carcass. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales you may eat. But whatever does not have fins and scales you shall not eat. It is unclean for you. You may eat every clean bird, but these are those from which you shall not eat: the eagle, or the griffin vulture, the ossifrage, the osprey, and the white vulture, and the black vulture, and the kite after its species, and every raven after its species, and the ostrich, and the owl, and the gull, and the hawk after its species, the falcon, and the ibis, and the bat, and the pelican, and the magpie, and the cormorant, and the stork, and the heron, and its species, and the hoopoe, and the ateli, and every flying insect is unclean for you. They may not be even. You may eat any clean fowl. You shall not eat any carcass. You may give it to the stranger who is in your cities, that he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. You shall tithe all the seed crop that the field gives forth year by year, and you shall eat before the Lord your God in the place he chooses to establish his name therein. The tithes of your grain, your wine, and your oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God all the days. And if the way be too long for you, that you are unable to carry it, for the place which the Lord your God will choose to establish his name therein is too far from you, for the Lord your God will bless you. Then you shall turn it into money and bind up the money in your hand, and you shall go to the place the Lord your God will choose. And you shall turn that money into whatever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, new wine, or old wine, or whatever your soul desires. And you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And as for the Levite who was in your cities, you shall not forsake him, for he has neither portion nor inheritance with you. At the end of 3 years, you shall take out all the tithe of your crop that year and place it in your cities. And the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance with you, and the stranger, and the orphan and the widow who are in your cities, will come and eat and be satisfied, so that the Lord your God will bless you in all the work of your hand that you will do.
Thank you so much. I know how difficult it is to read along and then re-find your place when it scrolls up. So Kol HaKavod, congratulations on keeping up with that, as well as Doug when he read. We could spend probably 3 years on this particular chapter, but we'll spend maybe 30-ish minutes. Just some recap points. Stay clear of false prophets, dream diviners, and those who try to steer you away from Adonai. Stay clear of gashing of the skin, shaving, tearing hair, which were the mourning, as in MOURNING, customs of the foreigners. And then it begins the discussion of the purity and impurity of animals. Just a quick side note, and I know that I'm only going to say this now because if I don't, I will forget. Have any of you seen that short flick, the movie-ish thing called The Lottery, where they stone? For those who haven't seen it, it is. I watched it in high school. It was one of the most horrifying. I still think.
Yes, I saw it, Randy. I saw it. I think I must have been in 8th grade, and I have never ever forgotten that movie. It was. I mean, you talk about nightmare. It was just. I mean, I remember going home going, oh my gosh.
Yeah. They put this on screen. So if you haven't had a chance to view it, if you have a macabre sense of wanting to see something weird, go to The Lottery.
But you'll never forget it. You'll never forget it.
Oh,
yes, it is. That is very true.
You'll have me to blame for.
Oh, it is. It is. I can't imagine the book. I just saw the film, and it was.
Oh, yeah, something else. Okay, moving on, Randy. In chapter 14, verses 3 through 21, discusses as a whole the purity and impurity of animals. Yes, true hooves and bring up the cud. Yes, creatures that live in the water with fins and scales. Yes, pure bird. Yes, pure winged creatures. And then the tithing of 1/10 of sowing. Okay. All right. I'm going to ask Ryan to screen share at this point our second reflection for our discussion. And let's see, Ryan, are you able to enlarge that? There we go. Thank you. Okay, this is by Rabbi Lewis and Barth, who had the overview that was at the beginning. And so you'll notice here that has been taken out because I wanted to take care of that at the beginning. So if someone would be so kind to read the selection, and I don't believe it's as lengthy as the Torah portion that Suzanne was kind enough to read for us. And it begins with much of this parsha. And if you want some help with the Hebrew, I'm happy to do so. Okay, I'm looking for hands.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Oh, all right. Much of this parasha emphasizes the need for difference between the Israelites and their neighbors, yet two themes stand out that relate specifically to internal matters of the community. One, the one central place of worship, and two, care for the poor. How the biblical authors bring these themes to our consciousness is a tribute to the rhetorical skill and the diversity of literary methods they employ. Scattered throughout chapters 12, 14, 15, and 16, the Hebrew phrase, Hamakom asher yivka Adonai alecha, the place that the eternal your God will choose, or variations thereof, occur at least 15 times. Though the author of Deuteronomy doesn't explicitly state the name of the place, traditional Jewish commentators and modern scholars have identified it as Jerusalem and have noted that the purpose of these references is to centralize the cult and the temple there. In general, the centralization of the cult has been viewed as a political dimension of the religious program to end local worship and its possible adulterous implications, or the opposite. The religious face of political discussion. The religious face of political decisions. There is another dimension of this effort that is equally important, the need to transfer the identification of the eternal as a desert god associated with Mount Sinai in Jerusalem, Mount Zion, and the temple. The repetition of the Hebrew phrase indicating God's choice over and over again raises a simple question: why? Biblical scholars have suggested at least two possibilities. Repetition would, one, help obliterate the memory of the Canaanite gods such as El Elyon, a Canaanite deity that gets merged with the eternal, and Shalem, which was associated with Jerusalem prior to King David's conquest of the city. Or two, provide through a decision of God a conceptual alternative for theophany, the notion of a self-revelation of deity associated with a specific place. A typical example of theophany is the story of the burning bush. The site, even the ground, becomes holy because God self-revealed there to Moses. And as we read in Exodus 3:5, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. Experiences similar to the burning bush caused the ancients to revere the place, and theophany was not the original experience of the Israelites in Jerusalem. The biblical authors replaced theophany with rhetorical repetition and added one more dimension, pilgrimage, as a practice to ensure that Jerusalem, Mount Zion, and the temple would be embedded in the minds of the Israelites as the people's single sacred site. In contrast to the technique of repetition, the commandment to provide for the poor is made in short paragraphs that end with a statement so true, so real, so powerful that it immediately embeds itself in our minds. For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land, Deuteronomy 15:11. This verse takes on even greater meaning when it is placed in the context of the passage in which it is found. Traditional commentators long ago pointed out a difficulty in our text in which the previous section begins, "There shall be no needy among you, since the eternal your God will bless you in the land that the eternal your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, if only you heed the eternal your God and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoin upon them this day," Deuteronomy 15:4-5. Yet a few verses later we find, "If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements in the land that the eternal your God is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin," Deuteronomy 15:7. We are long past the theological position that heeding will automatically bring blessing, and recognize that whatever the biblical authors might have meant by the ifs of verses 4, 5, and 7, they capture the truth as we experience it in verse 11. To repeat, "For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land," Deuteronomy 15:11. As we understand that the phrase "in your land" refers not just to the land and state of Israel, or to wherever Jews live, but to wherever human beings who are poor or needy live. The authors of our parashah conveyed their messages through repetition and accumulation and single powerful statements. Whatever the literary technique, ultimately we have to decide whether or not to pay attention. Our Torah portion opens and we conclude with these words, "See, this day I set before your blessing and curse," Deuteronomy 11:26. Shall we too establish a modern, reformed practice of pilgrimage to remind ourselves of our religious connection to the land of Israel? Shall we continue to be concerned about the poor and needy among us, even in an extremely negative economy? The burden of choice is ours.
Okay. Therein lies the blessing and the challenge of identifying as Reformed Jews, or those who remain in solidarity with us, because we ultimately need to make decisions. We can't just, well, some people probably just roll along and whatever happens, happens. But the mindfulness behind what we do in the practice of our religion or our faith is personal, and it's also communal. And so I open up the discussion to how you feel individually about keeping kosher, whether or not that has meaning for you. And if it does, if you could share with others why so, or if you don't, how that has been a decision that you've come to. And it's nothing that we have to agree on, because I think within Reform movement, that's the two-edged sword, is whether or not we're going to approach this legalistically, or whether we're going to approach it environmentally or humanitarily. Is that a word? Humanely. There we go. Because of, as Ryan used to tell me, that Paul, who's in the Beatles, Paul McCartney, his wife said, if it has a face, I don't need it. Or if it has eyes, I don't need it. So anyway, I would open up the discussion knowing that we will probably have diverse opinions. We also may find some commonalities. So if someone would like to
I resonate with the face comment, just saying. If it has a face, I don't eat it. But it's just a personal thing. It has nothing to do with kosher laws. However, as stated earlier, it makes it very easy to follow kosher laws.
All right. Others? I find, Mark, please go ahead.
I noticed that it said you shall not add to it or take away from it, but many times that's exactly what we and the rabbis and Jews of every time have done. We talked about keeping kosher. You know, back in the day, yes, if you had milk and meat, you were possibly dipping your mother's milk and meat in the same meal. But today, it's probably unlikely that you're going to have a dairy cow and a meat cow and they're going to be related. So you're sort of building a fence. You're adding to the regulation. Among the more, I don't know if I'd say more observant, but as you go a little further to the, maybe to the right theologically, there's 2 days at the beginning of the holiday and there's 2 days at the end. And that was more because, did I really see the moon or was it a star? Did I see a star or was it the moon? And what if I'm wrong? So we'll celebrate a second day. And I'm not trying to sound trite. I'm just saying that there were things that were added to practice, added to sacred text to essentially protect what the sacred text said. A lot of people say build a fence around it. So in some ways it says don't add or take away, but we've definitely both probably added and taken away.
So very true. Yes. Okay. Other thoughts? Okay. Suzanne Mallory, would you like to share what you commented in the chat?
No, I actually was just going to say that I and many of my students keep various versions of kosher. And one of the funny things that happened to me was on an airplane. And so one of my students comes up to me and says, teacher, does cod have scales? And like Doug, I'm a vegetarian and I have no clue whether cod has scales. So I'm supposed to be the expert here and I have no idea.
Yeah, indeed. I found in speaking to interfaith college groups at most especially Cal State San Bernardino, is the assumptions about Jews. Males are circumcised, you don't eat pigs. I mean, what else is there? Your party animals and bagels. And so trying to
I can accept all those.
Okay. All right. Someone shared about cod. Cod is one of the smoked fish you can often find in Jewish shelters, so I guess it's okay. There you go. Is that like a white fish? I don't know.
Isn't how we make our gefilte fish? It's from cod.
That's
No?
whitefish and pike.
Pike.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
We used to get cod in my house as a kid. It was sort of an orangey fish.
Okay.
At least the one we got would get baked. It came in a little package.
Okay. one of the disappointments for us, and then Chris, I'll be sure and call on you, is that this year's Seder, we didn't have, and if you've never tried it, please do, salmon gefilte fish. You will never go back to the other one, or at least that would be our preference. And so that's been a great heartache for us, going down to the Orange County Kosher Deli and getting our really expensive salmon gefilte fish. It's frozen. I mean, it is frozen solid. And you cook the whole thing in a pot, and some people choose to put onions and carrots and some flavorings in there. I'm not the cook of the family, so I don't know for sure. Ryan might be able to elaborate on that. But and then you boil it, and then you let it cool off. You're supposed to let it like really cool off, but some people like it warm. It doesn't even get lukewarm before we've already started partaking of it. And I'm dipping mine in beet horseradish, and Ryan is using the horseradish that makes tears in your eyes. No, I don't go there. Anyway, Chris, did you want to share something? And then Lynn, have I unintentionally ignored you? Did you want to say something? Okay, all right, she's fine. Chris, if you could unmute yourself, thank you.
There we go. I find it interesting that the rabbi, that the piece, that commentary that you had, and your focus as well is on the kashrut laws. When what struck me most about this passage was smiting or stoning the people who don't think the same way that we do, and how we don't talk about that. I mean, we ignore it. It's too painful. It's there, and ooh, that's what the Muslims do. You know, so I actually listened in on a service last night from Temple Sinai in Oakland, and the rabbi, not talking about this passage, they were talking about this weekly parsha, and she was talking about the same thing, about how for years, I mean, she's been a rabbi for a very long time, and she's taught tons of students, and every student that she's worked with, they've never talked about what you do when you're in isolation. It's always what you do when you get out. So I think we need to be careful when we're looking at these passages that have multiple concepts in them, to maybe slow down and look at smaller chunks, or be sure to include all those difficult parts in our discussions, because I found I've never focused on that. I have to say, I probably have never even read that portion. And like I said, it's always been, that's what the Muslims do. And we criticize as a society in the US, and that's what they choose to do. But their text says it, our text says it, which means the Christian text says it.
Your point is very well taken. And I also, there were a number of commentaries that addressed the issue of the poor and the needy among us. And I believe that in the midst of our quarantine and the virus, countless people, companies can only hold out so long in paying from home, and then eventually they've got to have some revenue coming in. And I am deeply concerned about the devastation that this is going to have on our economy, nationally as well as internationally. What kind of reserves or what kind of plans do we have to meet the needs? I mean, is this going to be 1929 revisited? Certainly, I think that we have learned, at least I hope so, from that experience, but there will definitely be those who are needy among us. There are those who are needy right now, and how are we going to meet those needs? And how are we, as the Jewish community, going to step up? Are we going to do as the Reform movement encourages us to do, to make donations toward those organizations that are working toward meeting that need in real and tangible ways? Or are we going to turn an eye or another cheek and say, well, you know, that's somebody else's responsibility? And so we as Jews are mandated to make those hard choices. And we're admonished in the Torah to be certain that our actions are about tikkun olam. We are mending the world. We're healing the world. We're in the process of making it a better place when we die than when we arrived. And yes, we may not know in this life whether or not our lives have had an impact, but certainly the heart connections and the soul connections that we make will attest to that. So I would open it up for the last couple minutes. If there are any issues that have come up either in this particular part of the Parsha, or maybe even going back, because I don't think that we'll have time to address the next one, but I would like to provide you with a forum in a safe space to share maybe even how you're doing in terms of this virus. If there are other discussions about the Parsha, let's go ahead and stick to that. But in the absence of that, I would like to encourage you to share how you're holding up. I personally I'm so over it, but if you have thoughts about the Parsha, feel free to share those, or indeed how you are holding up in the midst of this new normal. Chris?
I have a question. Newsom made an announcement about this new program for restaurants delivering 3 meals a day to seniors in need. I have a sister up in the Bay Area who desperately could use that help. And I've done a lot of research trying to figure out how to get her tapped into it, and haven't been very successful. So if anybody has any ideas, I would love to hear them.
Okay, so this would be different than a food bank or Meals on Wheels. It's actually restaurants that are providing meals for those in need. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so his announcement was that he's taking funds from FEMA and elsewhere to, one, get the restaurants open and get people back to work. And they will be providing delivery 7 days a week, 3 meals a day to seniors throughout the state. And there's an income and age limit on it. And my sister already gets Meals on Wheels, so I'm hoping that that will be funneled through that program, and people who are already on that will automatically get that. But I put that out there for people who, it sounds like, Randy, you didn't hear about that, so I'm glad I could provide that information. As
thank you for doing so. Yes.
But also if we can, maybe anybody else figures it out, maybe we can get it on the temple website or something eventually.
Thank you very much for sharing that, as well as offering that as something that would be vital and integral for us to check into. Other comments?
I have one more. Did you see the announcement that the federal judge in Los Angeles said that they need to reduce the population at Adelante and at prison ICE detention centers across the country?
And how do they plan to do that?
There are actually WHO and CDC guidelines on how to do that, and part of it involves, you know, do we already have people who are have compromised immune systems for some reason, the age, you know, do they already have a place to go? Do they have they want to try to be able to get the populations down to where they can actually maintain social distancing at all times, and that actually came down from the judge on Thursday. So
Okay, all right, thank you. Ryan has shared in the chat for everyone. The governor said the program begins immediately. Seniors wanting to see if they're eligible can call 211 or visit the state's main COVID-19 website. Did you do that right? Okay.
I did that, and it doesn't have any. I mean, if it's there, it's buried.
Okay, so it was a dead end, at least at that point. Okay.
Yeah. That's what the only clue that I got was, if you go to the volunteer section, you can volunteer to help get seniors meals delivered, and it was through Meals on Wheels. Okay. So that's the only thing so far. They may just be behind in how they're getting things set up, just because that announcement came out so recently. They said it would open up sometime this week.
Okay. Doug, if I can ask about the Mountain View, because I know Riverside is doing it. They're providing meals for not just the school-age kids, but families. At least breakfast and lunch. I thought Tiffany would be better able to answer that question than I. Is your district, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot as the superintendent, but is there some avenue for those
so
in need?
what we do is as soon as we closed, we're part of our emergency responses. We become a community resource center. So what my middle school is that we have in our district is our community resource center for South Ontario. We provide breakfast and lunch to anybody within our district bounds under the age of 18 and under. We provide them breakfast and lunch. Then what we also provide is information for all of our local food distribution centers within the city of Ontario that's available for everybody. And then we also have a senior program done through the city of Ontario, where seniors can go ahead and get food as well from a variety of distribution points. And also for those who can't get out or feel uncomfortable getting out, how it's brought to them. So we actually coordinate, and again, it's San Bernardino County versus Riverside County, but each city then coordinates, and each school district then has a provision. So we have our 18 and unders are covered by, in our area in South Ontario, are covered by our school district. We then have resources available for anybody who is in food insecurity. And then we also have additional resources to the city for seniors. And that's just on the food side. We also have mental and behavioral health components available as well.
Terrific, thank you. Suzanne Mallory has shared that seniors at least once a week in La Sierra used to be the senior center, and now on Wednesday morning, La Sierra University Church. So if you know anyone in the Riverside area, if you could share that information with you. Let's see. And let's see if you could send absolutely to the question that was asked privately. Happy to do so. Okay, I think that this about wraps it up. I would encourage you to be good to yourselves, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially. Don't spend money unwisely. You know, I know in the midst of crises, sometimes people like to do, they need to go to Shoppers Anonymous or something, just because it's an outlet. But I just ask you to be diligent in the ways that you take care of yourselves, and don't be strangers to one another. Vicky, oh goodness, got some excitement going on. If you could reach out, if you do have those contact information, and if you don't, Please know that in the meantime, we will look forward to seeing your smiling faces and hearing from your caring hearts, as well as the intellects that you all possess. That will be a joy for us. So until we meet again, I say sei gesund, may you be healthy, and may you be well in body, mind, and spirit. I thank you all so very much for your presence here today, not just your presence physically, but the gifts of your spirit. It's been a joy and a pleasure for me. Take good care.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy. Thank you
Toda
very
rabah.
much.
Sei gesund. Good
Bye,
Shabbos.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Toda rabah. Be well. And I'll be the last to sign out. You're going to look for leave meeting. Rosalie, did you find? Okay. It takes a little bit of maneuvering to find out where that is. It should be over. There you go. Okay, that you turned your video off, or yes, video's off. And then if you want to click leave meeting, then we'll go ahead and stop at that point.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take care of it for you. It's okay.
Thanks.
No problem. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Jim. Oh, I was having